All right, folks, here we go. It's championship weekend. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the betting lines. And we bring in Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info, prosportsinfo.com. Please check him out right there with college basketball and the NBA in full session as well. All right, Steve, it's championship weekend. College football nation is at attention, wondering what's going to happen with these college football playoff rankings. But we'll run through all the conference championship games, and it all starts on Friday night with a couple of non-playoff impacting games. We've got the MAC championship with Northern Illinois seemingly always in the mix against what's become a recent power in the MAC, Buffalo. And the Bulls are about a field goal favorite.
Yeah, I actually think the wrong team might be favored in this game. My power ratings make Northern Illinois a slight favorite on this neutral field. It's Detroit at Ford Field. These MAC games are often high scoring. Total on this one is only 49, though, so it's a pretty modest total. And that's because these are two decent defensive teams, especially Northern Illinois has been very good defensively this year, just 4.5 yards per play. They've been terrible offensively, though. They average less than 20 points a game. So Buffalo, the better offense, Northern Illinois, the better defense. But according to my power ratings, there is a little bit of value with Northern Illinois, especially at +3 or more.
One of the easier selections for me last week was Washington with a field goal against Washington State. I took that straight up. The Huskies have been the more dominant team, more physically imposing. The recruiting rankings would tell us that they have the more talented roster, and that's been proven on the field. And once again, by a 2-score victory on the road, Washington advances to the Pac-12 championship game as about a 5.5 point favorite against a Utah team that struggled against BYU last week. And the Huskies defeated by a 21-7 score.
Yeah, I really liked Washington last week. It's the best bet as well. Washington State was 10-1 against the point spread this year. Washington was just 2-9 against the spread. So the odds makers had no choice but to inflate that number. But I thought the wrong team was favored. I thought Washington, even on the road, was the better squad. I really liked the matchup with the strong pass defense, and it worked out the outright underdog win. Situation not as good this week. Now, after that big rival upset win, they're now laying points, as you mentioned, against a dangerous Utah squad. Utah very good defensively, mediocre offensively, and they're banged up offensively as well, some skill positions. I think Washington's the better team, but my power rating's only favoring by 4.5, so the current line of 5 is a little bit too high.
We go back to the group of 5 for a championship game early on Saturday, where UAB had been the dominant team in Conference USA the entire season. They were coming off a decent showing at Texas A&M. They take on Middle Tennessee State and lose by 24 points. Also an interesting situation where we get to a rematch situation in these championship games, but doubly so when they have to play back-to-back weeks. So the thing that was decided last week is that Middle Tennessee's at home against UAB in this matchup for the Conference USA title.
Yeah, last week they were a 3-point home dog, and now they're at home again, as you mentioned. And this line currently, I'm seeing it about a 1.5 point favorite. So it's about a 4.5 point adjustment, but I'm not sure it's enough. My power ratings favor Middle Tennessee by over a touchdown in this game. So I don't think last week's 27-3 win was necessarily that much of a fluke. I just think it was a bad line.
Got Steve Merrill on the line from Pro Sports Info. Please check him out for NFL, college football, Major League Baseball when the season resumes in the spring. Of course, the NBA and the college basketball season is tipped off for a number of weeks now. All right, we go to the selection from Conference USA, where Central Florida is obviously riding this 2-year winning streak. This is the first real groundbreaking, season-impacting, possibly playoff-impacting injury with Mackenzie Milton going down. The backup quarterback has played a little bit, but not nearly the talent that Milton provides. This game has been bet down from about a touchdown favorite with UCF over Memphis to about 3 to 3.5 points for the American Championship.
Yeah, they had an advanced line on this last week before the quarterback was hurt. The line was 7.5, Central Florida at home. These teams played back on October 13th. Central Florida was a 4.5 point road favorite. They won 31-30. That would have translated to about a 10-point line at home. So nearly anywhere from 4 to 7 points lower now because of the quarterback injury. Just too much uncertainty for me. Really a shame for Central Florida. You know, as somebody that would like to see more of a playoff than just 4 teams, I'm always rooting for a team like Central Florida to go undefeated to kind of tip over, disrupt the apple cart. Let's hope this quarterback injury doesn't do them in.
Yeah, I would be fascinated to see what the selection committee would do if they were faced with selecting Central Florida against a 2-loss team for the college football playoff, but most likely not going to happen at least this year. Texas, Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry makes its way to the Big 12 championship game. The Longhorns won edition number 1 at the gun, 48-45. They meet on another neutral site, but this time elsewhere in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Texas, Oklahoma, the Sooners about a touchdown favorite.
Yeah, I like Texas in the first game this year back on October 6th when they won 48-45 as a 7-point dog. My power ratings make Oklahoma 7.5 in this game, so I think the line is spot on. But I think Oklahoma's probably in a better spot this time in the rematch. Huge revenge motive. I did like Oklahoma last week as the best bet against West Virginia. It landed right on the number 59-56. Obviously, Oklahoma's defense is suspect. Texas has a better defense, but Oklahoma holds nearly a 3.5 yard per play advantage offensively, and I think that'll be the difference in this one, and they get the revenge win.
We're on the line with Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info, prosportsinfo.com for all of your lines and edges that you're looking for in playing Vegas. All right. We go to the Sun Belt Conference Championship with a program that has a history of not necessarily pulling off the huge upset, although they have one of the greatest in college football history going back 11 years at Michigan, but basically playing power teams close. So Appalachian State, an 18-point favorite in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game against Louisiana Lafayette.
Yeah, this is a big line, obviously, for a conference championship game. Appalachian State is just much, much better than anybody else in this league. Power ratings make it 16.5, so the number is a bit inflated here. But these championship games, obviously, teams often have motivation to win big. It's basically the final game before the bowls. And this is a situation where I could see that happening. These teams did play back on October 20th, and Appalachian won by 10 as a 26-point favorite. So you could actually make an argument this line is nearly a touchdown lower than it was in the regular season. I do think Louisiana Lafayette's turned out to be a little bit better than people expected. 7-5 straight up, but 8-4 against the number. Appalachian, meanwhile, 8-3 against the spread. So these have been two very profitable teams against the point spread. Lafayette actually holds the offensive edge, but a huge, huge defensive edge for Appalachian State, nearly 2 yards per play better overall.
With UCF possibly going down against Memphis, if that would happen, Boise State has the opportunity to be selected to a New Year's Six Bowl. They lost 2 games early. They've rebounded well with 9 consecutive wins. They're taking on a Fresno State team that they matched up with in a close game earlier this year, also in the conference championship game in the Mountain West last year. Boise about a 2.5-point pick right now.
Yeah, I've been using Boise quite often the last few months for my clients during this current win streak. I actually had a best bet again last Saturday on Boise in their win against Utah State. I also had a best bet on Boise a few months ago in this game, or actually a month ago on November 9th, when they beat, as you mentioned, Fresno State. Remember, that was a Friday night primetime game, and Boise was a 2-point home dog. One of the few opportunities ever in the last decade we could get Boise as a home pup on that very strong home field. Now they're a 2.5-point home favorite, so the line has been moved nearly 4 points. But +2 to -2.5 really isn't that much of a difference because it doesn't cross any key numbers. I'll be interested to see if they can do the same in the rematch. They've definitely been an underrated team here in recent weeks.
Prime time on Saturday night brings us the elite teams in college football, but because of that, it also brings us huge point spreads as the 3 marquee games in regards to, again, the elite college football playoff contending teams in action as huge favorites. The first one in the SEC, not so much a knock on Georgia's ability, but so much that Alabama has been this dominant with 28-point wins in that range against the likes of LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn, that they take on the Georgia Bulldogs, one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. Most people would agree, but Bama's still a 13-point favorite.
Yeah, the line's too high based on my power ratings. On a neutral field, I make it just 9. Obviously, the game's in Georgia, but Alabama will travel just as well, so I consider it a neutral. But on a neutral, it's 9 points. So 13 does look inflated. Not a surprise. Alabama's 8-4 against the point spread. I mean, they're the best team in the country. Everybody knows it. And when you go 8-4 and you've covered overall 5 of your last 6 games down the stretch, you have to start inflating the numbers. So I do think there's some line value with Georgia. They're actually 4-1 against the spread their last 5. They know Alabama well. Defensively, they're only about half a yard per play weaker. And offensively, they're only about a half a yard per play weaker. So this is a very good Georgia team. It's somewhat of a shame, actually, that they had that other loss because I really think they probably are one of the top 4 teams of the country, win or lose this game.
In the ACC, we've got a situation where Clemson has distinguished itself by far as the cream of the crop in the conference. Therefore, over the last several weeks in conference play, we've seen them take on the likes of a Pitt-type team in Duke, and some other teams, and they have been established themselves as a 4-touchdown favorite pretty much across the board against those teams. And depending on the flow of the game, they've either covered or not covered, but certainly had no issue in winning those games decidedly. So we've got an ACC championship game, and this has come up a number of years just because of the dominance of Clemson and previously Florida State, where the game is not much of a game, according to Vegas, and it typically plays out on the field. So a 26-point line for a championship game with Clemson over Pitt.
Yeah, and this totals around 53 points. So that basically would be like a 40-14 game is what they're saying. I think the under 53 is intriguing just due to the fact both teams run the ball extremely well. That'll keep the clock moving, shorten any big scoring plays, instant scoring plays. But it's not a good matchup for Pitt. Clemson, maybe the most dominant rush defense in the country. They give up just 2.2 yards per carry this year. The look-ahead line last week was 21.5 for this game. My power ratings make it 23. So I do think at 26.5, it's a bit high. But once again, I'm not sure I really want to just, back Pitt and hope they stay within the number when they have no chance of winning.
Like Pitt, Northwestern not with the most impressive record for a team advancing to a conference championship game at 8-4. Off the top of my head, that would be the worst that's ever advanced to a Big Ten championship game, aside from a Wisconsin team that, because Ohio State was on probation, Urban Meyer's first year. So Northwestern, a very odd team in regards to, they give up 39 points, the most they've given up the entire season, and losing to Akron. Of course, they lost to Duke by 2 scores. More recently, they've played extremely well, even if they haven't won all the games. They knocked out all the Big Ten Western Division leaders that were supposed to beat them as an underdog: Wisconsin, Iowa, Purdue, on down the line. They take Michigan to a 3-point game. They play within 3 points of Notre Dame until about 2 minutes left in the game. So Northwestern, a 2-touchdown underdog against Ohio State, but they typically rise up and play these games pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State's weakness this year has been the mediocre defense. They're a good offensive team. We saw what they did to Michigan last week, putting up an incredible 62 points. I had a strong best bet on Ohio State last week for my clients at +4. Obviously, I didn't think they're going to put 62 points up, but I thought it was a good spot getting them as a home dog. And their offense is legit. They're averaging over 2 yards per play more than Northwestern. However, defensively, Northwestern's been slightly better this year, about a half a yard per play better defensively. But I just think Northwestern's going to have a tough time. They're just not a good enough offensive team, where I think Ohio State's defense is mediocre enough where against a team like Northwestern, they can limit them. Of course, this is not a great scheduling spot, going from winning your big, huge rival game just to advance to this game as a home dog and now laying over 2 touchdowns. So not a great spot despite being a championship game.
Do yourself a favor and check out prosportsinfo.com. Go there and check out Steve's predictions and his takes on the NBA, college basketball, college football, the NFL as well. Steve, we always appreciate the time.
Thanks, Mark.